A very good evening to you and welcome to Take on Tech. My name is Jin Mboye. As always, we are glad that you are with us this evening. As you know, Take on Tech is all about letting you know what is happening in the technical space in Kenya and beyond our borders, and that is what we are up to as well tonight. Tonight, we're going to be putting focus on the recently enacted law. This is the Data Protection Then Bill, Now Law. We just want to let you know what it's about, what are the contents, and what you as a Kenyan need to know about this law and what you stand to gain from this law. To help us with this discussion this evening, we have a panel of three fantastic guests with us. I'll start with the lady to my extreme left. She is Janet Othero, who is a senior associate at Triple OK Law. Karibu sana.
Thank you. Jen.
Glad to have you this evening. At the center, we have John Walubengo, who is a member of the Data Protection Task Force, the only gent with us this evening. Karibu sana.
Asante sana.
And to my immediate left, we have Rosemary Kimwatu, who is a public policy lead at Oxygen. Karibu sana.
Asante sana.
As always, you can be part of this discussion. Our hashtag ever remains Take on Tech on Twitter. Our official station handle is at KBC Television. My handle is the Jane Boy. And if you so prefer to send us a message, our SMS number is 20154. And we always appreciate when you leave a name and a location that we address you by your name as we read those messages. So send them through. Any questions, comments, clarifications that you may be needing from this discussion. We will be glad to help you and assist when we can. So let's just get right into it. Now, it has been termed as a very long journey towards getting to where we are with this bill, with this now law. You even keep referring to it as a bill. Then bill, now law. But just let's start with the fact that it is now a law. By that simple fact, what does that mean when it comes to our journey towards protecting data for all Kenyans here in Kenya? Let me start with you.
I think it requires a complete mind shift in how we handle data.
Yeah.
Kenyans, I think, many times we've had really bad manners in terms of how we handle data. We can talk about right from our regular behaviors.
Yes.
When you walk into a building, you leave your ID, you sign on the book, in all sorts of manners. Even as elections, sometimes you even get a message directly telling you about your constitution, where you're from. You know, those very creepy messages.
And we take it casually.
Exactly. So what this data protection does, it comes to protect you, the human being, from the nuances of technology and what it can do in its extremities.
Right.
So it's basically a human rights reaction to technology. That's the basis of what the law is all about.
And also want to hear all of you, your thoughts in regards to the fact that it is now a law and it is happening right now. John?
Yeah, basically the biggest thing that we must do is to alert the citizens that now they have rights that previously could be abused without penalties from whoever is collecting our information.
Or without even our knowledge.
Or without our knowledge. So now the law has put in place somebody called a data commissioner who oversees the data regime or the data economy to make sure that the business enterprises or whoever is collecting information about us is doing so while keeping in mind the principles of data protection. For example, that the citizen has a right to know what is it you're doing with my data. They have a right to know what data have you collected about me, such that in case it's wrong, I can come and correct it. They have a right to even say that I no longer want you to collect my data, and also the one you collected before, I want it back. It's my data. So you as the enterprise need to put in place systems that could allow me as a citizen to enjoy those rights.
And all that is enshrined in this data law.
Correct.
Janet, your thoughts in regards to that it is actually happening?
Yeah, so I'm going to approach it from the other side in terms of while the citizen is guaranteed of rights, for business enterprises, we are seeing a new sort of a cost center in terms of compliance. Some of these businesses are already regulated and they face certain regulatory requirements for compliance. So this is a new layer of compliance that most businesses have to pay attention to and they have to take seriously in their day-to-day operations. So this is a good thing, I think. For the data subject, it's a good thing, but also for enterprises, it's a good thing for them to just go back and do a health check in terms of what systems and policies do we have in place. And if we did not, like you said, the data commissioner is there, let us seek help to basically have a perfect working organization.
And you know, just looking at the conversation that was going on social media, there is a part of the population that was saying, and I quote this, that you know, the delayed deliberations of this law failed to provide a reliable data protection framework when it comes to ICT here in Kenya. Do you think this is a justified statement, the delayed extended rather time that took for this law to come into, for this bill to come into law?
I would say the thing is, we had the EU GDPR as a sort of basis to build our law, and also we had to customize it to the situation in Kenya. Then we also had the technological advances happening in a very short period, and I think what pushed the limit was probably the Huduma number debate in terms of all the data that the government would collect. So I think it's not premature. It's not a perfect piece of legislation at the end of the day, because there are still certain regulations that need to be put in place. But owing to where we've come from and where we want to go, it came at definitely the right time when it needed to come.
So there was a gap.
I could also say that whereas the law has been discussed in Parliament for the last 10 plus years, the content of the current law is actually current.
It's
not like Parliament was discussing the version that was launched in 2007. The version that was discussed most recently and enacted actually contains the most recent things. Like she says, it benchmarked against GDPR, which is the European equivalent. And you know, in Europe, they are grappling with these things like today. So we actually benchmarked against GDPR and try to see how that can apply within the Kenyan context. So let's not imagine that since it took long in Parliament, then it's stale. That's not the case.
But it is justified to say that there was a gap that really needed to be filled with this law.
Yes.
Definitely.
Definitely. And there was actually this conversation also, a tweet that I saw that someone is saying, you know, the fact that we have it as a law right now, that means we have jumped leaps and bounds, because we are now dealing with first world problems, as one would say. But let's just look at the contents of this law in itself. You know, it is basically about the collection, the retrieval, processing, storage, use and disclosure of personal data. But let me start with you, Rosemary. Why should we even be so concerned about our personal data?
I think it's very important because right now this has been said before. What is the new oil? Data is the new oil. And the thing is, systems have become so accurate and almost a level of intrusiveness. So when that happens and systems and automation comes up, you need to protect the human being at the end of the day. So I think maybe that's the genesis of as to why such a regulation is required. So there has to be an interface. There are even things like automated decision making that is there in this act. Human beings have to be protected. There should be a human layer to some decisions. Supposing something that can say strip you out of your citizenship. Now we have our Huduma stories. So there has to be protection for us people from complete automation. That's the basis in the simplest form.
That's like the first step.
I could also add that we've had scandals in the first world. The US election in 2016,
I remember that.
Had issues where millions of American personal data was collected without their knowledge. Indeed, Facebook may not have been the main problem, but somebody who was using Facebook as a platform harvested personal data of Americans without their knowledge, and then sort of analyzed it in a way to be able to influence that individual sort of in the background, subconsciously. So the law comes in to say, if you want to collect data for political or whatever reason, the citizen must be aware. You can't creep on them and collect information and then use it against them. So you see, they are protecting citizens from that perspective.
Now, speaking of, just creeping on them and, on the citizens and using all this information, it has been happening here in Kenya and we cannot deny it. You always go there, write your name, your ID number, your phone number, and you leave it there. We're never too concerned about what they're going to use it after that. Now, when it comes to our behavior as a people towards the willingness in giving this information and the fact that now this law is now here and it gives us the right to after you're done with that information to ask for deletion or get that information back. When it comes to our behavioral changes, what direction do you think this law will direct that?
I think the good thing with this law is that it places a heavier obligation on the enterprises, like you said, the entities, than it does on the individual. Exactly. So for you as the individual, it just tells you this is what your rights are. But in terms of the enforcement awareness mechanisms, the obligation is heavily placed on the enterprises. So things like inform your clients, tell them the purpose, get them to give your consent, their consents if you need to use it for marketing. If you're transferring it out of the country, make sure it's an express consent. If you're going to retain it for a certain period, tell them. If you have, if they want to access their data, give them in a very good platform or in a media that they can use. So the obligations are more on the enterprises, which is a good thing because they're the ones who are known to commercialize and basically abuse all this information. Exactly. Abuse all this information. For the data subject or the individuals, it's more of telling you, this is what is available to you. Now that you know that this is available to you, pick one and run with it and enforce it as your right.
But honestly speaking, do you think we are going to be at the forefront in just, taking up this new power that we have been allowed to use?
That's why now we use your platforms.
Like this one, Take On Tech.
Tell people their right.
And there's so much live data about you. Let's give a clear example, like your hospital records. Today you go to this hospital, you're treated. Tomorrow you have the same condition, you want a second opinion. Sometimes it's a very big headache to go to get the details about your sickness from this hospital to transfer it maybe to another person. This law actually now creates provisions for normal citizens to be able to collect their personal data. By the time I came to your hospital, I got a diagnosis and and I was told A, B, and C. Now there's even a right of data portability. I can go and collect. I can tell the hospital, can you give it to me in a particular way that is and in a format that is usable for that next entity, such that if today you have computers, you can't give in a flash disk and then place I'm going to doesn't have computers. It has to be system, as in it's a total culture change in how we handle data. If it means that you have to print it out for me, you'll print it out for me at your cost. Hence, you issue on a compliance cost. And actually now take it in a form that is required. And the reason I give you this example is to show you the most basic of our human interactions and how those are going to be impacted. And it's not just for industries only. Even for us as human beings. Sometimes you're running as a side hustle. A side hustle that deals with a lot of data.
And we always wonder why you get these tailor-made advertisements on your social media platforms.
Not even social media, even your telephone, anything.
SMSs.
You get even sometimes people even coming to put a poster in your estate or even under your door, baby advert. Right now personal information is very personal and that has to be protected. You'll have to explain, how did you find out about Rosemary? You'll have to prove to the data commission that you got consent from Rosemary to use this data.
To do certain
and today
things.
if she gave you data, say, for a roadshow, you can't use it tomorrow for something else. For one product and use it for like 10 other products. It has to be, if I gave you my data for this particular purpose, it has to be for only that particular purpose. And I have to give you consent for you to use it in any other way. So in terms of application, yes. It's just a matter of making Kenyans more woke in regards to their rights. Because at the end of the day, that is what is commercialized.
And
what your data.
All right. Yes. You like to add on to that?
Perfectly said.
Perfectly said. But what do you think needs to be done in a way that will actually get the message to the citizens to let them know that you now have the right to ask for this information back, ask for deletion, ask for editing and correction of information that may have been previously taken, and you feel it needs to be doesn't reflect you in the proper light. But so what approach do you think would be the most effective when it comes to just letting the people know this?
I think I have a personal example that I always share. My ID, date of birth. The government thinks I was born in January. My mom knows I was born in October. The 01 and the 10. So the government clerks typed wrongly. So my national ID claims I was born in January, but my birth certificate shows I was born
different date
in October.
it's not bothered me, but now as I'm approaching retirement age, it means I'll retire 10 months early.
Yeah.
Now, you try to change your national ID data. It's a nightmare.
It's a whole process.
It's a nightmare.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
So, this law now, with this law, I can take government to court. Well, first it's the data commission. I tell her, hey, these fellas, I told them they've got my birth certificate, my date of birth wrong. they have not done anything for as long as I've been alive.
Yeah.
Can you write them a letter to effect the change? And if they don't, the data commissioner will penalize them. Now, once the penalties start kicking in, then the enterprises will wake up and the citizens will begin to learn that they have rights.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you know, we are always so quick to complain we don't have this, but when it's there, sometimes they don't use it.
Exactly.
But now it is here, let us make the most of it. Now, you just mentioned the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner. And you know, for our viewer who may be wondering now, what is that? It is a new office, it has been established under this law. But maybe you could help our viewers better understand what this office means.
What the Act does, it's provided for an office which it says it's meant to be independent and neutral in terms of its operations and functioning, and it's going to be called the Data Commissioner's Office. Then the Data Commissioner's Office is going to employ somebody who's going to be in charge, basically the Data Commissioner, who's going to be in charge of the day-to-day running.
Okay.
So the Data Commissioner and the Data Commissioner's Office will be in charge of regulation, industry practice, doing assessments,
Registration of those data controllers.
inspections, audits, if need be. They'll also, the thing that I appreciate with the Act is that they appreciate the Act is not a one-size-fits-all. So the Office of the Data Commissioner has been given mandate to allow various sectors to self-regulate themselves when it comes to data protection.
Yeah.
So what he'll do, he'll just oversee and provide direction, but he'll let certain industries come up with their own self-regulation mechanisms for data protection. But also in addition to that, if you are not aware of what your position is in the whole ecosystem, data controller, data processor, the Data Commissioner's Office is supposed to help you do a privacy impact assessment.
And identify where your niche.
Just identify whether you're high risk, low risk, or where you fall, and basically guide you in the steps towards achieving compliance.
All right.
So this is a good thing. We hope to see that a regulator who's a bit savvy and knowledgeable in this area.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing to get a political appointment, but it's also one thing
to be working.
To give the industry somebody who knows what they're doing.
To hand it to the developers of the law, I think there's a whole rigorous interview process through the Public Service Commission. I think for me that was a win.
Exactly.
In terms of, you know, it actually going through almost like a government HR process.
Exactly.
So let's expect good
Hopefully.
things based on legislation. I think for me that was a
That's
plus.
a win.
That's a
Other
plus.
than just previous provisions, which meant just allowed for
Anybody.
an appointment.
Anybody,
can be appointed.
An executive.
Now there's even a requirement. Is it masters?
Yeah, it says, and it gives four
Four
areas
areas.
of practice which this person must be proficient in, which we think is a good idea. It's a very good
At
idea.
least it sets a certain level
Exactly.
of requirements that the
Exactly.
basics are not so basic. You know, we are able to have confidence in this office. And maybe we could talk about some of the clauses that are actually governing the security, confidentiality, and integrity that is also enshrined in this law. Let me start with you, Walubengo, just looking at some of these clauses that are there. What would you say in regards to the security and the confidentiality and the integrity that has been, you know, incorporated in it?
Yeah, basically when it comes to data security, the typical areas to look at is CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So there's a clause that requires whoever is collecting personal and sensitive information that they have standard practices on how to secure that data. That may translate to their certifications. There are many certifications that enterprises can undertake to show that their processes, their systems are
They have
up
the
to
requisites.
standard. Then the other thing, depending on the nature of your business, the data commissioner will require that you do annual audits. You know, we know that we do financial audits because it's a requirement. Societies or something else.
Even central bank,
Everywhere,
But nobody
companies
really does IT audits and things like that.
Yes.
But now with this law, people will be required to have third-party experts coming in, reviewing your
audit
system
purposes.
and making an opinion, so that you can then demonstrate to the data commissioner that you've done your bit. Because attacks will come, whether you have
Actually, to add on to him, the licenses or the registration certificates to be issued are renewable. So for it to be renewable, there are
You
certain
have to
minimum
check
thresholds
some
you'll have to show.
boxes.
Exactly.
Exactly.
For you
Alright.
to get your certificate for the next year or the next couple of
and
years.
the renewal is
Yes.
at the discretion
Of the data commissioner.
La 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 la.
Walud Day can be renewed for 3 months.
Exactly.
On the other end are renewed for 3 years.
Exactly.
So you're
Depending
depending
on what
on
you've
how
been
you,
doing.
the
Yeah.
threshold.
Yeah.
So I was saying that if
you're attacked, I mean, there's nothing like 100% security.
Yes.
Yeah, even the U.S. Department of Defense occasionally gets hacked.
They get hacked.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that as an enterprise, you're preparing for the day that if at all you are hacked, you can demonstrate to the data commissioner that it wasn't negligent.
Exactly.
Yeah, you did your bit, but this occurred, and this is how you're recovering from it.
Okay. Now, still on that, just looking at now the registration process, because number one, it will definitely be merit-based.
Correct.
It's not just about, knowing somebody at the commissioner's office. If you don't meet the basic requirements that are the basics that are required for, registration even in the first place, you don't qualify. Let's talk about the registration process for the data, the controller and processors.
So the Act provides for data controllers and data processors.
Yes.
So controllers are basically the people who collect this data and decide what to do with it. Then the processors receive instructions from the controllers on what to do. Do you process it for is it for, like, let's say if it's for an airline who's the controller, they have people who process the ticketing for them.
Yes.
If it's for a financial institution, they have people who provide them with ATM services and credit card services, and so they process all this data.
Okay.
So once you know which category you fall on, then there's different requirements for data controllers and data processors, but more or less the same. So the the commissioner will want to know things like what size is your entity, what type of data do you collect, have you categorized them, do you have technical measures in place, do you have policy measures or what I'd call standard operating procedures, do you have skilled staff, are you using other third parties for these things, and do your third parties match your security requirements as an institution? And then finally, an interesting addition to the Act was, do you have indemnities in place in case of a breach? And this now means that entities have to look at probably insurance policies or financial provisions for that when breaches occur or when they are penalized, they have something to pay up from. So this is a good addition, because initially people would, there'd be breaches, but nobody would report. And even if they don't report, no regulator would take the step of trying to find out whether there was actually a breach or not. So this is good in terms of if there's a breach, there's mandatory reporting timelines, and if you don't report, there's a penalty. So this is, we hope that the requirements that the data commissioner will put in place will be followed to the letter and not be played around to accommodate certain people because they're big tech and certain people because they are small or startup entities, so that it's across the board.
Now, when it comes to now the penalty bit in regards to now reprimanding, especially when they now go wrong deliberately, do you think this also mandate will fall on the office of the data commissioner, or there needs to be another separate body that now deals with it? Let me hear from you, Rosemary.
And the maximum is up to 5 million shillings or a percentage of your annual turnover. So right now, and that's 5 million shillings per incident. So today, if say 5 data touch points touching on 5 people, you get
against you.
It may not look like for bigger companies, it may not look like much, but when you look at it in the bigger context, it can actually be a nuisance from a business operations perspective. So it's a very big issue for corporates and industries and entities to make sure, and even people who do businesses on their own, touching on private data. That's a thing that we must have very clear in our mind. That it's one law that's not just coming, it's coming with a whip.
Correct. Go wrong, whip us into shape, back into life.
Just to clarify, data controller does not mean enterprises only, because it's very clear. It means natural persons and companies.
So anybody who has
was an Instagram kiosk where you tell people, send me your number, send me your house, I'll send a courier. Then you pass on this person to a courier who now gets your number and drops your goods at your door. They'll also need to show that they have policies in place
that protect your information.
Exactly, that protect the information that you're giving them on their social media platforms.
So even government also can be penalized. Government ministries, government agencies, etc.
Exactly.
I just wanted to add on, the fine also is a percentage. So whichever is higher, 1% or 5.
Actually, what happened in the final piece of debate, the cap was put at 5 million.
5 million.
So whichever is lower, not whichever is higher.
When we were designing it, we wanted the higher.
So the higher to just keep people in check.
But also, just to add on it, remember the data commissioner, he'll not probably have police in his office or anything, but he's given the mandate to get in touch with other, like arresting agencies and law enforcement to help him prosecute some of the things that need to be
All right.
prosecuted. Yeah.
Now, let's talk a bit about, the whole transfer of personal data outside of Kenya. Part 6 of the data protection law. First of all, how happy does this make you?
Actually, let me tell you, nowadays we live in a global village. And that is very true.
Yeah.
We can't have all the servers seated here in Kenya. And even in terms of technology, there are things like cloud computing that have come up. In regards to cloud computing, there's owners of cloud systems, those who have such platforms, even say that those platforms are even much safer than your server that sits locally. You understand? The best maintained. I'll give you an example.
11
Today,
feet under.
today you say, at these studios, our server room is over here. I just need to know that your server room is here, and I come and say, do something to disrupt. But with coming up technology, there's created redundancies such that your data can be bounced off of various jurisdictions.
Yes, and it still remains safe.
It still remains safe. But the beauty about it is that the data commissioner under the law will you'll just have to prove that you've met specific standards. The world is a global village. We need, even in all factors, it can be financial services, it can even be in healthcare.
Correct.
Today we say that I need to move my data from Kenya to India.
Yeah.
Or India to Kenya. We also want to
And the
move
other way around.
you understand? So this provision, I think, was a very good development in allowing cross-border data transfer. But of course, the allowance for which is held under the Data Commissioner's Office.
Okay.
So that's
It's
it's
conditional.
conditional.
Yes, and
Well,
maybe we
conditional
should get to
and-
know some of those conditions
And
that are actually
the general
regulated.
condition is that the remote host or the country abroad should have similar legislative framework. So like if you want to transfer data to Uganda, the big question is, does Uganda have a Data Protection Act? The answer is no.
Such that there's no loophole on the other end.
Yeah, it's because you could be safe in the Kenyan environment,
yeah.
but if the data goes to Kampala, they don't enjoy the same protection. So the data commissioner would say, that's a red flag, but then they go to the next level. Who exactly do you want to transfer your data to in Kampala?
Okay.
And what are their, security frameworks as an enterprise? Are they like ISO certified? Do you have contracts with them that force them to adopt our security measures?
Okay.
And maybe to add,
Yes.
so later on, when we know that this cross-border data transfer, even from a legal perspective, even when we have, say, disputes, there'll really be no server kufungua. That's really a problem we have in terms of concept and understanding.
Yeah.
It's going to be cloud, and in cloud, the data is bounced out of one country to another, depending on for latency. Latency is seamless movement. Yeah.
Okay.
If it's heavy here, it's heavy there. So we must also then explain to audiences that sometimes in certain situations, things, technology has moved.
Yes.
The only thing we need to do is just to provide and say that, look, can the data be accessed?
Yes.
Is it
Exactly.
safe?
Exactly.
Is it secure? If it ticks all those boxes, then we don't need to see a box.
I think I want
Thumbs up.
to just echo what she's saying, that most bureaucrats, when they think about retaining data in Kenya, they look at it in terms of it's safer in Kenya. Yeah, but really safety is a feature that is not dependent on location per se. It's more dependent on the processes, procedures, professionals that you're putting around that data.
Yes.
So that's why I said in the law, even if the country as a whole doesn't have the act, how about that company you're trading with? Can they demonstrate to the data commissioner that they are observing certain standards? If
That are
yes,
up to the same
to the
level.
Kenyan
Yeah.
standard. Then the data commissioner will have no problem.
And that brings in now the second point under, that whole aspect, and that is safeguarding this information before, it's sent out.
Yeah.
And that boils down to even that single, delivery company that you may be having out there, maybe having a branch here, another branch in Tanzania, Uganda, but you're not safeguarding this information before you transfer it to other users, to another third party in another country. When it comes to these safeguarding measures, maybe you could let us know what this individual, now the companies, need to do.
So some of the things that the Act recommends is encryption, things like encryption, pseudonyming, and basically just using things like access codes that require multi-factor authentication, sending it in a very tight format so that it's not something that needs to be
Can
sent
be easily cracked.
piecemeal across various people.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things also the data commissioner will look at. How are you sending it out and how is it being received on the other end so that there's no leakage in between the channels that you are going to use. And also, like you said, in terms of also your contracts, how have you safeguarded yourself as an entity? Have you asked for indemnities and guarantees from this other receiving
On the
entity
other end, yeah.
such that if there's any break of chain in the custody of the data, they should be able to hold you accountable for any negligence or reckless behavior in between.
Yes,
Yeah. So that's about it.
that's about it.
Yeah.
Anything more you'd like to add into that? Now, maybe, okay, now when it comes to now the processing bit that is done here in Kenya, before it is now, especially now in the servers in the data centers here in Kenya, what are the conditions that are coming with that? Let me hear from you, John.
Basically, we started by saying the law gives rights to the citizen, or they call them technically the data subject. Let me just take one right. She called it the portability. As an individual,
Yes.
I may have a mobile money account with Safaricom. And over the years, Safaricom has a history of my M-Pesa transactions. Let's assume I want to VUCA and go to Airtel. Usually, I would leave that history with Safaricom. But this right allows me to take my data from Safaricom
Yeah.
and give it to Airtel. What that then means from a processing perspective is that Safaricom must re-engineer their systems to be able to service me when I want my data. Because most enterprises design their systems without putting in mind that customers may want to leave. And even if they left, so what? They
Who
will
thinks
retain
of the
data.
competition?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in terms of processing, there's going to be a lot of inward
System,
looking for enterprises to review their system and basically redesign their processing around the rights that citizens have been given.
This is going to unite us as a nation.
Correct. And you see, the thing with this is that a lot of people, the European Union gave most entities 2 years to comply. Our act is very silent on a compliance period. But like we know with most statutory bodies, we are hoping before the body is put in place and somebody is appointed, it will take a couple of months or years, which will enable entities to start complying. But either way, the compliance is not like a 1 month or a 2 month process.
Time.
It's
going to
time.
take a bit of time because there's policy change, there's cultural change with the staff,
Infrastructure.
infrastructure change.
Precisely.
It's going to take a corporate governance sort of a change in strategy.
Mindset.
And, mindset.
Ooh.
It's going to take a lot of things. And that's what people need to appreciate, that it's not a one-size-fits-all. Each sector will have different sort of parameters. But at the end of the day, when the data subject comes calling, you need to be ready.
Yes.
You need to have complied.
At any time.
Exactly.
Now, another part of this law that I want us to really talk about is now Part 7, which deals with exemptions. First of all, why is it important to have these exemptions? And then this now especially falls on the side of the controllers and the processors. Why is it important to have these exemptions put in on paper?
You see, sometimes it's very important, especially for instances like research. You see, the instances when your personal data is needed for your own good. It can even be for a national security issue. We need to maybe do an investigation or something like that. So therein come exemptions in order to allow the normal human processes to be able to be carried out. And as you say, even I think there's journalism, research, you get
That have been
specified in terms of exemptions. Those are very important and
I could
But
add
where do we draw a line to just make sure that there's no, it's an exemption and not a loophole that somebody can take advantage of?
so.
before I answer that, the exemptions, I like the research bit. If you look at medical records, Kenyatta Hospital has been keeping medical records of Kenyans since, let's say, 100 years. The law, whereas it allows you as a patient to take your data and tell Kenyatta Hospital, delete my record, you realize that Kenyatta Hospital may have sort of a more public interest right not to delete your data. Why? Because if they want to address the cancer problem
They will need
They
that.
need the historical
Mm.
data. So if all Kenyans pulled out their medical data from Kenyatta Hospital, then it will be acting against the public health interest. So there are exemption on certain data sets that will then be exempted from the rights that people will have otherwise enjoyed. Journalism, she mentioned it also.
Yeah.
Literature and arts.
You know, if you're covering an event, you don't need permission from the politician. Can I publish you tomorrow? You know, because the act says the politician has a right of consent on what you do with his personal data. So you see, the other exemption was security. You know, if I want to, for example, do some surveillance on some suspect terrorists, I just get a court order, but I'm not sort of mandated to alert the terrorist. Can I monitor you? You know? So yes, there are rights, but they are limited in certain sections.
And these exemptions are specified to certain areas,
Exactly.
Yeah.
need by areas to be specific.
Yeah.
So how then do we just, because we are Kenyans, we have very brilliant minds out there that, you know, manage to find a loophole in such provisions. How then do you think, do we need to go about this to just ensure that this is not exploited in the wrong way, in the name of, you know, history, statistics, medical journalism, art?
So you see, the mechanism provided by the Act is that somebody has to lodge a complaint that their rights are not being observed by the person who's using their data. So when it comes to, I got an SMS, I signed up at a coffee shop, I got an SMS from a coffee provider that I have no relationship, so I go to the Data Commissioner and complain my personal information is not being used. So when it comes to things like if I see a clip on your TV station, or I see my medical history being passed around in a classroom or anything, then if I go to the Data Commissioner and complain that my personal data or my personal information is being circulated without my consent, then that's when the Data Commissioner will look at the context in which this personal information was being released without consent. And then that's when the party will be called upon, and the exemptions now they'll rely on are those, and they'll be able to tell the Data Commissioner it was during an investigative piece, or it was a journalism, or we were monitoring this person's bank accounts, and the bank didn't need to get his consent because we had a court order, and this is the information we gathered, and because of that we are relying on this as a defense.
Nice.
So there are mostly defenses which when you're called upon,
Yeah.
you can pull them
Pull
up
them
and
up.
say this is the defense I'm relying on.
All right.
And also in addition,
Yeah.
the Data Commissioner can also, on his own volition, investigate. Somebody doesn't
Can
have
issue
to complain.
exemptions.
No, somebody doesn't have to complain.
Exactly.
Supposing the Data Commissioner will have a right to actually go and see, okay, fine, you're doing it for journalism, you're doing it, say, for research,
Yeah.
you're doing it for security. They can actually come to you and actually investigate your processes, your procedures to see, are you exploiting this? Are you using it the right way?
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be somebody complaining. The Data Commissioner has
Can also
that
move
Has
their
the right.
Yeah.
they
And
can
the
move
power
by
to.
themselves
Okay.
to come in. So that is also maybe a good thing.
Yeah.
It answers your question of how else.
So you can't rely on it from the
From
word
what
go.
go.
Yeah,
It's
entirely.
actually no, it's a defense.
Defense.
It's only a defense when you're called upon to explain why you do not follow
Yes.
procedure.
All
So you
right.
can't now, as a TV station, the way you publish your stories, of course, you usually get consent from your interviewees, but now you have to be really careful about how you get these consents and document some of them, and where you don't have consents, if you're called upon to explain, then that's when you can be able to tell the Data Commissioner, this is what happened, this is the context in which we use it, and we only use it in this particular
this
context.
capacity.
Yeah.
Remember, we are talking about the data protection law. All you need to know about this law, you know, it has 11 parts to it. You need to go through it to just understand what this means for you as a Kenyan, because it goes such a long way in protecting your personal information. We have been wanting this for so long, and it is finally here. So why don't we take the time to just read it, understand it, and get to know how we can best use it to protect ourselves when it comes to the online space here in Kenya. So before we run out of time, I just want to sample some few tweets, and this one I think is very important. Now, I think it was in the last week we saw the Higher Education Loans Board saying that, you know, they're going to publish names and pictures of individuals who have defaulted their loans since 1975 to 2019. Now, there's a tweet here by Jonas Baraza who says, what HELB intends to do is illegal and unethical to say the least, considering the data protection bill was signed into law recently. Be prepared for privacy breach violation lawsuits. You know, just read the first act. Now that we have this law,
He has a point.
I want you, but I would like to
but also in defense of HELB,
Yeah.
when you're giving somebody your personal data, when you're signing up for the loan, there's a part where they tell you this is what we can do with your personal data.
But this was then.
So
Of
in
course.
1975, when you are signing up,
And this
and
is-
that's what they'll now need to prove.
Yes.
When this person was signing,
Signing up in
Yeah.
19...
because I'm sure they say we have a right to do this as HELB. So we'll need to look at HELB's documentation and contracts and just see, did somebody give their consent for their pictures to be published in a daily newspaper?
But now, with this law in place, they have a right to say, you will not publish
Exactly,
my picture.
exactly.
Let me even make it worse.
Very
I was
briefly,
in
we're almost
campus,
out of
I was in
time.
campus 30 years
used to
ago.
call
We
it
didn't
boom.
sign anything.
All right, you just used to get the money. You see, and
No,
that's
are you sure you didn't sign anything?
How?
Are you sure? Are you sure
There was
in
nothing.
the hurriedness to get the check.
As-
come to your account?
As,
How did that used to happen?
Okay,
you
even
get
when
an
you're making
admission
the-
One at a
number.
time, one at a time.
Even when you're making the application.
Yes.
Those are the things that now we are talking about. Entities need to be very careful
Careful.
about
Very
the things they put out
And
there.
very deliberate.
Exactly.
So this now brings back to the whole point of now restructuring as a whole
Your whole process.
to accommodate this law.
Exactly.
Exactly.
All right. Now let's quickly go to another tweet by Kimathi Felix, who says rather, data security and privacy are integral parts in life in today's hyper-connected world. We now need to regard the protection of people's personal information as a human right. Most organizations have accepted that they bear the critical duty of ensuring this personal data is protected. When it comes to acknowledging the fact that now it is a human right and not just a requirement, do you feel there needs to be more stringent measures that need to be put in place to just ensure that this human right is observed to
The letter.
the letter?
It's actually in our constitution.
Yeah.
What this law did, we have a right to privacy in our constitution. It brought to life.
That's
Operational.
It
Article 31.
operationalized it, Article 31.
Yes.
So it's not actually coming from nowhere. It's what we signed on as our constitution. And I think when I read BBI, nothing has changed. So let's let that. It's actually operationalizing the law.
Okay.
And just to add on to
Or rather
that,
reinforcing.
Yeah,
and just to add
reinforcing.
on to that, and I keep on referring to this, there's a current ongoing court case in
Yeah.
the constitutional courts. And it's,
Huduma one or
no,
another
no, data breach
Yes.
of a certain company
Ah,
where
I
some
remember it.
employees were able to remove data in a
Sync out
certain
with
format
customer data.
and were tried to sell it to somebody.
Yeah.
And the person they tried to sell it, his data was there. So he took up the action in his personal capacity to say, hey, my data was breached. I need to see what policies these people have.
Yeah.
And if they don't have it, he's asking for a six-figure sort of
Compensation.
compensation.
Settlement.
So you see, we have an act, there's a case in court. If those two things do not set the pace for what people need to do, I don't know what else people
It's
are
a
waiting
problem. All right, one last tweet. We have about 3 minutes to go by Argentina, who says, you know, sensitive personal data such as passwords, financial data, biometric and genetic data, religious or political beliefs need to be processed with explicit consent. And now this also brings into the discussion, you know, the religious side of the divide. You know, we are also quick to give information when it comes to religious entities. Are they also bound by these laws?
Yeah,
by this law?
Because the law is very clear. A natural person or any person who's processing. The only thing is that there are certain limits that religious entities, trade unions, welfare-based kind of organization, they get certain exceptions in terms of some consents they need from their members. So as long as you can show we are members of the same community and this data is used within the membership of this community, there are certain exceptions you can enjoy as a religious society.
All right.
But at the end of the day, there must be a minimum level of compliance
For all.
for all.
Now, as we bring the conversation to a close, just want you, all of you, to have, your closing remarks, and maybe you can all speak in regards to the business opportunities that, investment opportunities that this law has just opened doors when it comes to, for Kenya, in terms of business. Briefly, as you give your closing remarks.
It has given a very big opportunity for people versed with data protection.
Yeah.
You can help companies with compliance. You can become a data protection officer, not just for a company, but you can be a data protection officer for many entities, for groups. So I think for me, that's a very big business opportunity. And of course, compliance, audit and testing, it's required annually. So it's a very big opportunity for corporates, and actually talk to consultancies, talk to people who actually understand what this is actually about and what the compliance touch points are, such that you're able to shield your business from adverse regulatory action.
All right. John,
Yeah, I
closing
support
remarks,
her.
briefly.
Yeah, very briefly.
Yeah.
Basically, the law now formally requires enterprises to take IT security more seriously, and that means more jobs for my students. So I'm happy with that.
You're happy for that.
I
Janet?
think the good thing is that now, with the Act giving permission for sectors to come up with regulations themselves, organizations like KBA, Doctors Union, hospital associations, this is a chance for them as organizations and as communities to come together and show the purpose for which their members subscribe to them.
Yes.
Certain regulators such as the Central Bank, the Insurance Regulatory Authority, also in terms of their membership, this is their time to stand up and tell their members we need to sit down and come up with a plan before the data commissioner does that for us.
Yes.
And also for lawyers, security experts, IT experts. I mean, the opportunities are
now
endless. Just plug in
narrow
somewhere
in,
there, become a consultant, become a legal audit specialist, a legal compliance specialist, and let us help everybody achieve compliance.
So there is opportunity all around just by the fact that this door has been opened and we have been wanting it, and it is finally here. Well, that brings us to a close of Take on Tech. We have been looking at the data protection law. It had been a bill for so long, and now it is a law. It is now in place, and let us just make the most of this law to just protect ourselves, at least from an individual point of view. Let's start with there. As an individual, get to know what this law means for you, and then you can be able to make informed decisions when you are giving out your information. We have been speaking with Janet Othera to my extreme left. She is a senior associate at Triple OK Law. At the center, we have John Walubengo, who is a member of the Data Protection Task Force, and to my immediate left, we have Rosemary Kimwatu, who is a public policy lead at Oxygen. Thank you so much for being with us and making time for this discussion.
Pleasure.
Remember to join us again next week right here on KBC Channel 1 for another fantastic edition of Take on Tech. My name is Jenwamboy. Do enjoy the rest of your viewing. Good evening and good night.
Okay.